Welcome to the Chilling Ghost Stories channel. Today we bring you a famous Chinese ghost story titled The Moonlight Mystery. If you enjoy the story, please give us a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you. Now let's get started.
Chapter 21. Completely Incomprehensible.
Shang bent down and looked at the long staff and the copper-faced hole placed on the floor, then glanced at Wenguan. Wenguan understood and said, "Honestly, I'm not worried that you two will laugh at me. Can you guess what these are for?" "This is a ghost-catching tool. I bought it from abroad and had it sent by mail." Shang laughed. "Oh, I never expected this. You've always been so skeptical about those supernatural things." "I still don't believe in them. Over the years, I've explored the anatomy building and found no clues," Wenguan continued. "To be honest, it was only after Yè Xīn appeared and told me about the phenomena that couldn't be explained that I thought, let's give it a try. I saw an American magazine featuring this ghost-catching tool. According to some American ghost hunters, ghosts are a form of matter and energy. They produce a field, and exist in the form of electromagnetic waves. This tool is essentially a device for detecting and amplifying electromagnetic waves. If it encounters a relatively strong magnetic field, it will emit a kick-kick sound. Of course, if it detects a significant heat source, like an uncovered human body, it reacts as well. That's why the other day when Dr. Feng was working in the anatomy building, as soon as I entered, the device signaled that someone was inside. I knew right away it was Dr. Feng. But I haven't had any success with ghost catching yet. You should be more careful with your words. You've already caught that cunning ghost, O Yang Shang." Dr. Feng joked. Shang snorted. "Are you telling me that you've cruelly used me as bait to catch the big fish, Zhang Wenguan? What if Zhang Wenguan is the real villain, a true ghost?" Dr. Feng replied, "I may not move very quickly, but when you come, you always bring all sorts of things, so it's hard for you to move fast too. That's why I've recognized you for a long time. I felt you were sneaking around doing something, but it would have been impolite to ask directly, so I invited her to investigate. If Zhang Wenguan were really a villain, preventing him from carrying out his work every night, he would have chopped me into pieces by now, just like your friend's illusion." Seeing Shang wrinkle her nose, Zhang Wenguan quickly said, "All right, Dr. Feng, let's not judge me anymore. I feel embarrassed, so I've been sneaking around like this. I think I'll stop this foolishness and stick to my previous theories." "What theory?" Shang asked curiously. "The one I've always called the 405 murder case. In fact, it never existed," Zhang Wenguan said confidently. Shang shook her head. "I still can't believe that it's just a coincidence that every year, one female student jumps from the same room, on the same day, and all of them are suicides. If it wasn't a suicide, then what else could it be? If it were a murder, the police would have found some clues by now. Over the years, I've spent a lot of effort analyzing the neuropathological aspects of these jump cases. My conclusion, which you may not believe, is that all these female students suffered from different degrees of mental illness." Zhang Wenguan replied. Shang muttered a soft, "Ah," feeling very puzzled. "My thesis was on the neuropathological analysis of the 9 suicide cases in room 405. I've gathered a lot of data and conducted interviews. For example, the first victim, Du Jing, was best friends with the victim, Xiang Yuhong, who died the next year. In the spring of 1977, Yuhong was hospitalized for mental illness, and Du Jing, who seemed completely fine, jumped to her death that same year. I interviewed their teachers, friends, and family, and found that after Yuhong was hospitalized, Du Jing became depressed and lethargic, losing interest in studying and social activities. All signs pointed to her suffering from severe depression. Suicide behavior is a common symptom of patients with depression. Before leaving the hospital, Yuhong heard about Du Jing's death and reportedly cried terribly. However, Yuhong's delusions didn't recur, and she didn't need further hospitalization. But after returning to school, she no longer paid attention to her friends, and if anyone asked her, she would reply, "You can't replace Du Jing." She even believed she was the cause of Du Jing's death. By the spring of 1978, Yu Hong started saying terrifying things, like, "Du Jing is waiting for me on the other side." This showed she had prepared for her own death. It's a pity that back then, people didn't understand mental illnesses well and just labeled them mad people, overlooking the psychological and emotional aspects, which led to tragic outcomes. As for the female students who jumped later, if I had time, I'd tell you more. Shang interrupted, but did all these female students who were hospitalized for mental illness experience hallucinations? Why? For example, why did Yu Hong first have hallucinations? Why did the later female students also have hallucinations? And why did all the suicides happen at midnight on June 16th, such a special time? Zhang Wenguan said, "I think this is the most fascinating yet perplexing detail in my investigation. I believe that Yu Hong was the patient who initially had the hallucinations, which then influenced the next generation of female students living in room 405. After Yu Hong died, the images from her hallucinations, like the moonlight calling her, the girl in a white dress, and the disfigured face, appeared in the consciousness of the female students who later committed suicide. It might sound implausible, right? But I've investigated and found that Yu Hong often talked to her friends about her hallucinations, so after the first 2 years of incidents in room 405, the illusion seemed to spread across the school. It's very likely that the female students who jumped in the following years were influenced by these rumors and had their own hallucinations, which made them more inclined to choose the same day, June 16th. Later, the school realized that this was a serious issue, so they repeatedly reminded everyone to avoid retelling the story, treating it as part of their ideological work. This had a noticeable effect in stopping the spread of rumors. By the time the 2 new student cohorts joined the school, although there were still people mentioning the 405 murder case, the specific details had essentially been lost to time. Yang Shang shook his head. That makes it even more strange. If the descriptions of the hallucinations have largely been forgotten, how could they still appear in Yè Xīn's dreams? Zhang Wenguan thought for a moment, then said, "I really can't explain it, nor can I explain why the hallucination first appeared in Xiang Yu Hong's mind. That's why I've been trying to find the cause in the autopsy. However, I also don't think further investigation will yield any results. As for Yè Xīn, you understand her better than I do. Besides the moonlight, the image of the girl in white with a disfigured face, she's had many other hallucinations, like the ghost of her father, or Xie Xuan, the student." Yang Shang quickly interrupted, "It seems like her father really did visit her." The afternoon before Yè Xīn received the bad news, he even left her a jacket as a keepsake. When she returned to the dorm, she saw the jacket there. Zhang Wenguan was surprised, rubbing his forehead in thought for a moment, then said, "I also remember Yè Xīn mentioning the jacket. If it was there, there must be an explanation. Perhaps her father knew he was seriously ill and feared he wouldn't have another chance to see his daughter, so he tucked the jacket into her luggage just before she left. Or maybe Yè Xīn had a premonition that her father was weakening and ill. Reflecting on the past with this old object, she might have mixed up the timing of the jacket's appearance with her memories of him." Yang Shang sighed, "Although you're a little hesitant in your explanation, it does make some sense. But it still feels a bit far-fetched." Zhang Wenguan said, "Yè Xīn's case is quite unique. She does have strange hallucinations, especially those involving Xie Xuan. But at the same time, when I interact with Yè Xīn, I sense that she has a high level of analytical thinking, she's very calm, and she understands herself well. This is rare in patients with schizophrenia. Zhihai Ding, my mentor, agrees with my impression." From the start, Dr. Ding believed that Yè Xīn was different from other female students who had been hospitalized. Although she has hallucinations, they don't affect her thinking. Yang Shang suddenly had an idea. "Professor Zhang, I'm so fortunate to have you as a mentor on neurology. I'd like to ask for your advice. up to this point, Yè Xīn still doesn't fully realize that Xie Xuan doesn't actually exist in her life. She's just interacting with an illusion. She's even falling in love with it. What should I do to help her understand this? At 10 a.m. on June 7th, they met in the patient reception room. Yè Xīn smiled and said, "I've been worried about you. How's everything? What kind of spooky tricks has Professor Zhang been playing?" Ouyang Shang recounted everything that had happened the night before, including the part where he was wrapped in skin, drenched in sweat, and turned into the first ghost caught by Zhang Wengun's ghost-catching machine. They both burst into laughter. "I've also been trying to find the whereabouts of Yi. But if we're just going by her name, where do we start searching?" Based on the dates in the diary you read, she was studying with Tiaoyang Juan in the 1963 class. I asked my mom if she knew any female students named Yi from the 1963 class. She racked her memory and said she studied in the 1965 class. Though she knew some people from 1963, she didn't know all of them and had never heard of that name. I tried to get her to look into it further, but I'm not sure if she's trying to help or not. Yè Xīn thought for a moment, then said, "You could try asking about the person known as the Tractor. He seems pretty famous." "Alright, I'll give it a try." Ouyang Shang casually asked, "Speaking of famous people, has Xie Xuan been here today?" "He's been here twice already. He just left when you arrived." Yè Xīn's eyes were full of affection. Ouyang Shang sighed silently, then took out a photo from his wallet. "Let me show you a photo of a handsome guy. See if you recognize him." Yè Xīn carefully examined the photo and saw a shy young man. She shook her head and said, "I think I might have seen him around school, but I'm sure I don't know him." "Why? Is he your prince on a white horse?" Though she had expected it, Ouyang Shang felt a heavy heart. She pulled out another photo showing two young men, the shy one from earlier on the left, and a tall, broad-shouldered man with straight eyebrows and bright eyes, very handsome. Yè Xīn looked at the man on the right and was about to tease Ouyang Shang by saying, "So this is your prince," but when she saw the serious expression on Ouyang Shang's face, her usual playful demeanor gone, Yè Xīn lowered her gaze and looked more closely at the two men in the photo. She suddenly felt an uncomfortable sensation. "I don't know these two guys, but somehow, it feels like I might have known them." Ouyang Shang lowered her head and quietly repeated the words she had prepared in her mind, but when she opened her mouth, she said something slightly different. "Yè Xīn, I don't know how to say this, but I need to tell you, and I hope you won't be mad at me for it." She pointed to the shy young man on the left and said, "His name is Xie Xuan." Then she pointed to the handsome man on the right and added, "This one is Li Zhiyang." Yè Xīn shuddered and stared at Ouyang Shang in surprise. She looked down at the photo again and fell into a long silence. During this time, Ouyang Shang felt as though she had become Yè Xīn, caught in the same confusion and struggle. Tears began to fall from Ouyang Shang's eyes. But Yè Xīn remained strangely calm. She didn't cry or angrily demand answers. Instead, she circled the faces of the two men in the photo with her finger. Ouyang Shang understood that Yè Xīn's brilliant mind was processing this information quickly, trying to clear away the fog that seemed to be enveloping her. As Ouyang Shang had predicted, the initial urge to cry and shout faded like a storm passing quickly. Or perhaps it had never come at all. Yè Xīn, terrified to the extreme, yet regained her calmness almost immediately. Her mind raced with questions. Why was she sent to the psychiatric hospital? Could it be that Ding Liang Juan, being an outsider, had a clearer view and diagnosed her correctly? Why had Ouyang Shang, when she began investigating, uncovered such terrifying results? Did she realize how destructive these revelations could be? Why should she trust Ouyang Shang? Was this part of a plot to convince her she had a mental disorder and force her into treatment until she became a soulless shell? Yè Xīn immediately rejected this possibility, not only because she seemed to have an unshakable faith in Ouyang Shang, but also because rumors and nonsense usually disappear on their own and become the worst nonsense in history. However, if what Ouyang Shang said was true, then had she just embraced the greatest nonsense herself? If she accepted this, would it mean she had fallen into an endless abyss of suffering? She had once thought that love, like a blooming flower in the tough days of youth, was eternal, only to realize it was just a paper flower. Not only could it not withstand the wind and rain, but it would also wither under the sunlight. But in her heart, this love had been with her through her struggles, and she would never forget it. Was it because of this feeling that she had to live forever in an illusion of a perfect paradise built within her heart? Yè Xīn couldn't understand anymore. There had been so many times, whenever she pondered, her head would ache as if struck by a hammer. This time, it was the same. Tears fell, dripping onto the photo. Yè Xīn suddenly grabbed Ouyang Shang's hand and choked out, "Ouyang Shang, I don't know. I really don't understand, please help me." Never had Ouyang Shang seen Yè Xīn so helpless. The pain poured out in her tears, but Yè Xīn immediately shook her head, as if shaking it could dispel the sorrow. Then Ouyang Shang told her about her recent discovery about Xie Xuan and her conversation with the leader of the art club. In the end, Ouyang Shang said, "I know this is really hard to accept, but whether you accept it or not is up to you. You can try to remember if anything stands out, like if he ever brought you a gift." Yè Xīn froze, but without needing much time to think, she replied, "Xie Xuan never gave me anything." Normally, this wouldn't indicate love. Yè Xīn thought of him as an unrefined and natural guy, not materialistic in love, even showing that he was not worldly. But now that Ouyang Shang had pointed it out, it seemed all too logical. Yet, Yè Xīn despised this logic. It meant she had to start resisting her own way of life and love, especially during these turbulent days. Yè Xīn would rather return to the illusory world than face this reality. I also have a tape of the singing contest we did earlier. If you're ready, I can play it for you. Yè Xīn shook her head and said, "I trust Ouyang Shang. Let's put this aside for now. I need to calm down first. But you tell me, how should I accept this reality? Tell me, have I really gone mad with schizophrenia?" Ouyang Shang was taken aback for a moment and thought, if Yè Xīn can ask this question, then it's not schizophrenia, is it? I really don't know. I don't understand neurology. But I think, just having hallucinations doesn't necessarily mean schizophrenia. I believe that if you recognize you've had hallucinations but don't let them control you, then you're still healthy. Right now, I'm so scared. Not only because I might have had more hallucinations these past few days and can't tell what's real or not. What's worse is that I feel helpless, unable to escape these hallucinations. Shang had the feeling that Xīn still needed to live like Shang. She had to leave this hospital to live happily. So, you've realized that you really are having hallucinations? I need time to think about the past few months. I don't know if I'll break free or sink deeper, I really don't know. Despite the intense headache, Xīn tried to recall the confusing events she had been through recently. I will definitely help you. Looking at Xīn's distressed expression, Shang felt that his words sounded weak. Where should he start? Xīn knew she trusted Shang, but she still rejected the truths he had spoken. Where was Xie Xuan? He should come and clarify everything. Xīn knew it was up to her, to unravel the tangled mess, even if the result would bring pain, even if the beautiful dream would shatter. But no matter how beautiful the dream, it is still just a dream. Xīn sat quietly on her bed, recalling the events that had disturbed her life. But where should she begin? With no other option, she decided to start with Xie Xuan. It all started afternoon on that spring day when he quietly appeared in the student union's office, signing up to participate in a self-composed and performed song contest. At that time, she had been half asleep in the room. It seemed he didn't know the nickname, Jin Mao Shi Wang, came from the novel The Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber by Jin Yong, and he mentioned needing a piano. At the singing contest, he was late and nearly got disqualified. But then he still showed up and sang 2 songs, Yè Xīn and Chu Dai, Dai Chu. At that moment, he seemed very familiar with Jin Yong. Yè Xīn was from the Return of the Condor Heroes. He must have attended a training session about Jin Yong, right? But strangely, the girls from Class C said that Xie Xuan already had the nickname Jin Mao Shi Wang, yet when they first met, he seemed to have never heard of that name. Why was that? In that same contest, clearly Xie Xuan didn't show up, and his name wasn't on the results list, so why did she call his name in protest? The event organizer had been confused and couldn't understand. Now, she realized that except for her, no one else had seen Xie Xuan. Later, he appeared on a train heading south. When they got off the train, he insisted on not going back to her house. But on the return trip, she met Xie Xuan again. 2 days later, he accompanied her to Yanxing to find Shěn Wèi Tīng, and both witnessed the tragedy of Shěn Wèi Tīng jumping off the building, but only she was called in for questioning by the police. Xie Xuan was nowhere to be found. When she left the police station, Xie Xuan appeared again and went back to school with her. He even said nonsense, which made her angry. In both trips, only she could see him. When she met Xie Xuan again, she had been admitted to the psychiatric hospital. During her darkest days, he visited her and wiped away her tears. Without him, she didn't know how she could have gotten through those tough days. Every time, he wore a white lab coat to blend in, never officially visiting the family room for patients, further proving that only she could see him, and there was no one else. Except for Wang Lanshan. It was Wang Lanshan who had recognized him in her heart, but she hesitated to say the name Xie Xuan. When forced by Shěn, Wang Lanshan finally said, "If I say his name is Xie Xuan, what does it mean? It's just a name." Had she recognized him but refused to call him Xie Xuan? Who was he really? Shěn couldn't understand, and her headache intensified. She thought for a moment and began to feel that Xie Xuan was just a big wave in the ups and downs of her life over the past 6 months. To understand everything clearly, she still had to go back to the beginning. Why, shortly after enrolling, did she often have dreams about the girl in a white dress, the mysterious music, and the mangled face? It seemed that Xian Yuhong and Shěn Wèi Tīng also had such dreams, and their outcomes were death. Was this a prediction of her own fate? People like Yuhong and Wei Qing seemed to have heard of the moonlight. Wei Qing even knew its origin, but in the end, they all had to die, and she, too, seemed destined for the same fate. Later, she saw a perfectly preserved specimen in the anatomy lab, but only she could see it. It seemed to be proof of a hallucination, but the diary of a man named Tiao had confirmed that the specimen was real. Why could only she see it? The fact that she saw her father was also something no one could believe. After 7 days of being brain dead, how could her father come all the way from far away to Jiangjin University? That was a hallucination. Later, in the morgue, her father's body spoke, which, of course, was another hallucination. But how could she explain the jacket her father wore? She hoped that Shěn Wèi Tīng's suicide was also a hallucination. But sadly, that was the truth. Was it really suicide? If so, was it fate? If not, who killed Wei Qing? A person, or something else? Following Wei Qing's suggestion, she went to the school's record office. But who had placed the senior year's file from the Yue Guang Society on the table, along with a piece of paper with a phone number written on it? When she heard that the school intended to send her to a mental hospital, she ran away for her life. When she reached the nursery gate, she was almost at a dead end, but a taxi inexplicably pulled up right beside her. Who had called the taxi? A woman had made the call. Could it really be that ghosts lead the way? Then came a terrifying night at the broadcast station. Where did that eerie sound come from? What about the hallucination of Dr. Feng being torn apart? Why Feng? After being admitted to the psychiatric hospital, all the inexplicable events seemed to revolve around Wang Lanshan. What did she know about the 405 murder case? What kind of person was she? A mental patient? An amateur actress with extraordinary skills? A master of neuroanalysis? Or a killer? Why did Wang Lanshan kill Dr. Deng Liangjuan? All these doubts, if she continued to think about them, would only lead to more intense headaches. Shěn was eager to dismiss them and looked around at a patient in the bed next to her. For some reason, the patient reminded her of the mysterious specimen in the anatomy building. If the diary wasn't a hallucination, if the specimen was real, it meant she had seen things no one else could see. From that, she wondered, could it be that hallucinations are things that only she sees, and others don't? Just like Wang Lanshan, who might know people's thoughts, but others would think it's just a hallucination. Shěn stood up and looked around. Wasn't it free activity time now? She was anxious to meet with Wang.